Well, it's time now for our final discussion of the show. We were talking a little bit earlier about international trade and the idea of companies that are maybe looking to take their businesses overseas. We're going to reverse that a bit now and look at some of the issues involving companies that maybe want to do more business more closely right here in the UK and specifically in the Midlands. I'm delighted to be joined by two people who know all about this. We've got Hakan and Richard from Evelyn Partners. Just explain a bit about your two jobs then. Richard, what do you do?
Yeah, so I work in our employer solutions team. So my role is advising companies on all aspects relating to employing people in the UK, and equally if you're looking to move people in and out of the UK, also looking at domestic tax issues, taxation of packages, structuring those packages as well for your employees. So the whole breadth of taxes really and how it impacts your employees.
It's a broad portfolio, isn't
Yeah,
it, that? And Hakan, from your point of view, what's your specialism?
So I specialise in customs advice, and so that involves both imports and exports, UK, worldwide, quite a lot of trade between EU and UK, obviously, and companies who want to establish themselves in the UK, I would help them with making sure they do things right and not spending more on duty, customs duty than necessary.
And we were talking right at the start of the show about the ramifications of the wide-ranging budget that we had a few days ago. How much of the budget feeds into what you two do then, from your point of view?
From my perspective, it was quite significant. I mean, it was a big budget in every sense of the word, particularly the amount of revenue that the government is looking to raise through additional tax. I think the headline was the increase in employers' national insurance rates going up to 15% from 13.8%. And you know, we've looked at various scenarios how that could impact companies, and as an example, if you've got a company with a wage bill of about £5 million, 100 employees, in real terms that could be an increase in your national insurance bill by 18%, taking you up from about 550,000 to nearer 650,000. So it's a huge hike in terms of the employer national insurance costs. Other elements that companies are going to have to think about in the UK is there's been changes to the rates at which the national minimum wage, national living wage will need to be paid with effect from April next year. So again, an additional cost that is going to feed through to companies.
I guess from your point of view, the changes in the budget, when you're comparing them, it's more important to compare what other countries in other parts of Europe do rather than what we had in the UK before, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. You're sort of looking at this holistically. You know, what's the cost to the employer, and particularly if you're looking at it from the angle of moving people around, is there some optimisation that you can look at to potentially not be paying those national insurance rates.
And Hakan, on the customs side of things, because the previous budget we had a lot about free ports and all sort of things, didn't we? Not so much from your side this time?
No, not much at all actually. There was some discussions about free ports before the announcement came out. There was some speculation about that it will be more free ports in the UK, in addition to I believe 12 that we have now. But as it turned out, it was a bit of a misunderstanding. What was intended was to have more customs areas within the existing free ports. And that's something that we kind of expected, because these free ports were launched not many years ago, and there's still a relatively new area that is under development and is being invested in these free ports. But other than the free ports, with these additional customs area, there really was not much in the budget that is affecting from a customs point of view. So no change to existing customs duty rates, no additional or any kind of like restrictions on the different duty reliefs that we have in the UK since many years. So not much change, no. Some on the excise, which I covered to some extent, but not on the customs side.
But of course we also have a government only 100 odd days in who've said that they want to renegotiate the relationship with Europe, don't they, as well? So I guess over the next few months there's lots of things that potentially you're going to be monitoring quite closely at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we talk about freedom of movement of people, what are they going to be looking to do in that sphere? So I think everything that we've got used to over the last 3 or 4 years, again, that could all be subject to renegotiation. Is
the UK still seen as an attractive place for an overseas company to come and invest now, either before or after the changes in the budget? Are we in demand?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest. I mean, I can talk from the experience of the amount of interest that we are getting from companies, you know, around the globe where they are looking to move people in, and it's often an attractive idea if that you're a company that you've got your ownership outside the UK. You might want to think about, right, shall we get some of our senior executives to come and work in the UK, look at how it operates, how can we make our culture fit with that business in the UK? So it's still seen as quite an attractive rate. Our overall income tax rates are, you know, they're not huge outliers in terms of being particularly low or expensive relative to the rest of the world. And equally on the corporate side, it's not seen as an overly expensive place to come and do business.
Is it as easy though as it used to be for people to make the transition into the UK?
It's harder for people because you have to think more around now, that whereas before, when you're within the European Union particularly, it was very easy with your UK passport to move around. You obviously need to think more around rights to work, rights to live in the UK. How long can I realistically have somebody over here working for a company in the UK? So that's definitely made it a lot more challenging.
And Hakan, on the customs side of things, in the months after Brexit, I'm sure you, the same as me, we talked to lots of businesses who exported, who were tearing their hair out at the amount of extra paperwork that was needed. Has that all settled down a bit now, is it?
Yes, well, if we think first of say, a company that is not an EU-based company, so say a US company who wants to start importing into the UK. For them, of course, Brexit really didn't make a difference, whether we were part of the EU's customs territory or had our own customs territory. If you move goods from the US to the UK, there's still a customs declaration to be made, there's still customs duty potential to pay. So I think for overseas companies outside the EU, it really did not make that much of a difference, and actually the UK duty rates, customs duty rates, are slightly lower than the EU duty rates in general. So I think that the big difference was, of course, for the EU businesses. So say if you're Italian jeweler, where you were used to having sold to UK customers without any kind of customs complication. For those businesses, it became a big change, and that it is now what I see is that overseas companies within the EU are now starting to kind of get used to that. For a while, it was actually many businesses who decided we're not going to sell to the UK any longer; it's just too difficult. And those businesses are now starting to say, well, actually, it's still difficult, but we have to find a way because there's revenues to be made, and we can't just ignore the UK. It's too big, too important market for us.
But by having a base then in the UK, that gets over some of those problems for them.
Yeah, often that is a much better option from a customs point of view. If you're establishing a UK company and the Italian companies sell to the UK company, and then the UK company sells to the UK end consumers, that's often a much better model. There is lower costs, and you will have access to duty reliefs as a UK business. If you're an Italian company, you cannot access all those reliefs that is available to a UK business. So.
And would these, Richard, typically be the kind of companies with the kind of issues that you're dealing with?
Absolutely, yeah. They're looking to move goods into the UK, looking to move people into the UK. You know, often it's a case of market expansion, and as I was saying earlier, often you want people who've got that strategic knowledge of the business overseas to say, right, how can we actually realistically get ourselves trading efficiently and developing our business in the UK? And that's where you'll have often your really good talent overseas. They'll be wanting to bring them into the UK and start to generate those the development of the business. So it's often a case of, companies have to spend a lot of time identifying the right people, but I would say equally understanding, how do you do business in the UK, how does it operate? It's often those intangibles, and particularly when you're moving people, making them comfortable when they come to the UK, that can often be your biggest hurdle.
You mentioned culture earlier, and that's one of the things, isn't it? You've got to get into the mindset of what British people, British employers, British employees will want and expect.
Yeah.
And is that part of an education process that you and your team would carry out?
We to be frank, we don't do a huge amount in that area. It's more giving them that framework of, if you bring somebody into the UK, in terms of employing them, how they're going to be taxed, how you might want to reward them in terms of structuring your package for those individuals. That's the kind of thing that they need to think about. Equally, does the company actually want to say, well, we'll keep that person legally employed overseas and we'll effectively just try them working here temporarily for 2 years, see how that goes as well. If it goes well, the family settles, they might want to move across to the UK, then you're into the whole realm of, right, we're physically relocating somebody.
So I'm starting to build up a picture here about how many different elements there are that have to be thought about for this process. So I guess what you really want is to be in at ground level with these businesses before they start the planning process, I imagine, because otherwise you've got to maybe untangle things. Is that fair? Is that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's much better to get that advice up front. On the customs side, it's not everything is lost if you haven't thought of that. You can actually, I help clients every week to reclaim customs duties that they have overpaid because they didn't think of, say, the EU free trade agreement, for example, or they realized that they haven't classified their products correctly, so they have paid a higher duty rate than they should have. In those situations, you can typically reclaim the duty paid, and I do that quite a lot. So not everything is lost, but it's so much better not to have that realize too late that we're paying more than we should.
What's the first conversation that you would want to have with a business, when they're thinking about making the move?
Particularly if they're looking to move people, the kind of things that you need to understand are, what do you want them to actually be doing in the UK? So the nature of the work they're doing, how long are you planning on them coming over to the UK for? Depending on their home location, you have to think around things like, is this person, particularly say if they're based Central Europe, is this person actually going to be travelling in and out of the UK on a regular basis, as opposed to somebody maybe coming from the Asia Pacific area or North America who might just want to go for a more full-blown, right, I'm going to base myself in the UK on a full-time basis. So there's a lot to think around, whether there's going to be degrees of travel. And then the type of person that's coming over in terms of the role that they're doing. One thing that companies do struggle with, and this echoes Hakan's point around having that pre-planning discussion, is if you're bringing, for example, a director of your overseas company into the UK and you decide, right, talking to my earlier point around getting these people familiar with how the UK business works, we'll put them on the board of directors in the UK. And companies just think, right, we've done that, we've got them that UK board role. Don't then decide to properly track how much time is that individual coming into the UK to do that board role. And unfortunately, you do get situations where you come to the event after a company's done this and it's been happening for 3 years, and you're having to tell the company you've actually got some tax to pay in the UK, and those hundreds of thousands of pounds that you might have been paying that person in bonuses and extra incentives, you've now got to pay tax on that cumulatively. If you're telling HMRC late, HMRC will say, well, we want some interest penalties. You can end up with a very hefty tax bill just from one individual having a few trips into the UK. And it really speaks to that wider point around, if you are going to start to look to do business more regularly in the UK and move people around, as an organisation, have you got process in place to actually track where your people are spending time? And as I say, a lot of my
These are things a lot of people won't even think about.
No, they won't. They won't. They'll look at the scenario of, well, this person's employed by us overseas, so we've maybe got them employed in the USA. They pay all the taxes in the USA. Yeah, they're in the UK a little bit, but not that often. We're okay, aren't we? And then you have to go back and say, well, again, what have they been doing in the UK? How long for? And that's where it can very quickly unravel. And again, you've suddenly got quite a significant tax bill. So a lot of what we like to do is get in at that pre-planning phase and actually walk companies through, if this is strategically what you're looking to do, this is what you need to think about. You can put some planning in place that can mitigate your overall tax exposure. And when we've actually done that groundwork, they know next time they look to do this, it's a lot easier to actually move people into the UK. They know what they need to be looking for.
And I know there's no such thing as a typical client that you'd be dealing with in this area, but roughly how long would the process take then, from a time when you have an initial conversation to them actually being here, fully operational, job done, finished?
I mean, I've had scenarios where it's been turned around within, you know, a few months, less than 6 months. Sometimes, going back to our earlier point around people having the right to work in the UK, you know, how quickly can you get that documentation from the Home Office? Some companies who are very forward thinking, they might be doing an 18-month lead in time as well. So, you know, you want companies to be having those discussions as soon as possible, and probably once they've identified someone, I would always say that's the ideal point for us to come in and work with them to say what's going to be efficient for you in terms of how you structure their earnings, how you actually set up the working arrangements, what support do you want to be giving them to, you know, spouse, dependents, all those sort of non-work related issues that still become part of what they need to be thinking about.
And Hakan, from your point of view, the same question really, what are the typical pitfalls, the things that people will forget about until it's too late from a customer's point of view?
Yeah, I mean, if you would be moving just goods into the UK and not people, you could in principle do that without having to set up a business. But most likely you're going to have to apply for a VAT number because you will make supply of services or goods in the UK. So I would say the best thing is to get us as advisors involved at least a good 3 months before you plan to start actually moving goods into the UK in your own name. The things to think about is making sure that you have advice already before the first goods arrive, so that you have the right classification, you have the right partners to help you, and it's with advice like I do, and it's also about getting a good freight forwarder, customs agent who can make that declaration and work with you. Many clients who don't really think about that relationship and outsource the declaration process to a third party without really giving many clear instructions what they want that third party to do. So that's something that I help with too, is to sit down with the client and say, well, these are the kind of instructions in writing you need to provide, otherwise things are is likely that the third party will take own initiative, and that could turn out horribly wrong.
And I imagine also with both of you, you've got quite a contacts book now in the area of people that you could recommend that your clients might want to talk to, whether it's freight forwarders, tax advisors, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, you can point them and make sure they're talking to the right person, can't you? Because so often you can find yourself going round and round in circles to find the right person to chat to.
Absolutely. I think we're fortunate because we have quite a lot of specialisms within the firm. So most issues we will be able to help the client with, and it's nice because it's a one-stop shop in a way. But there's certainly, very niche services such as making customs declarations. We don't do that, but we can make sure that the client is finding the right partner to work with.
And has ticked all the boxes they need to tick. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Hakan, we were sitting down almost exactly a year ago talking about business and particularly some customs related chat. How different is the marketplace now compared to 12 months ago, or is it different?
Well, I think the businesses that already did import goods a year ago, with or without my help, they certainly know more now. There's, I think, a good level of information available, but there's a constant pipeline of overseas businesses that want to come and establish themselves in the UK. So there's quite a lot of companies. Well, they all face these kind of questions and challenges for the first time. So in that sense, not much have changed really. It's every week I come across businesses who haven't really thought about these things that we talk about. So in that sense, not much has changed, but yeah, every year that is passing since Brexit happened all those years ago, businesses are more well informed.
Final question from me then, really to both of you. How do you sell the benefits of being in the UK to an international company? Because obviously you're going to want to give them an incentive to let them know that it's worth them going through this process. What do you say are the big benefits to them?
I think the UK, the one thing I would say is certainly in the kind of area that we work in, but I think more generally, and this is talking to people who have run businesses overseas and have come into the UK, is they actually get a feeling you can actually work with people in the UK. You can work with businesses in the UK. It's not somewhere that's seen as a difficult place to trade or to bring people in and work. And you know, a lot of people have a very positive experience. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lady who'd relocated and set up a business specifically in the Midlands. So not just, you know, thinking UK, she was actually thinking,
a
I
wise
want
woman.
to come and work
A
in
wise
Birmingham.
woman.
Yeah, American lady, and 10 years later she's got a very successful business. So the more you hear those really positive anecdotes of people who've been effectively done it, it's been a success for them. I think, you know, you can point to that and almost say, well, why wouldn't you want to do it? There's no real drawbacks, you know.
The whole been there, done it. If you can
Yeah.
show a case study of somebody that's maybe in the same sector as they are, and say,
Yeah.
look, point you in the direction of these people,
Absolutely.
they can tell you from the horse's mouth, then, can't they?
Yeah.
Hakan, have the final word for us then. You know, how do you sell the UK as a great place for overseas businesses?
Yeah, I think if you are, say, a business in Americas or Asia, it's the languages, I think, an advantage. They would typically speak English. They may not speak Swedish or any other language in Europe. So I think the language thing is an important one. From a customs point of view, HMRC is fair to deal with, is not an overly complicated authority, and they do want traders to come here. They do want to facilitate trade. So as long as you get advice and not rush into something, you can usually make very good arrangements in the UK and use the UK as kind of the port, if you want, for your overall Europe businesses.
Perfect place to end. I think that's a wise piece of advice anyway. Take your time, whatever you're going to do. Make sure you've planned it out properly, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Richard Hakan, thank you so much for your time. That's it from Birmingham Business TV for this episode. Just remains to say a big thanks to the team from Evelyn Partners for hosting us in their fabulous premises here in Colmore Row. We've covered a fair bit of ground today, from the budget to business exits, international trade, lots besides. Just shows what kind of great expertise we've got right here in Birmingham. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.